First here, yeah, there we go. Impressive. You made it, Logan. Let's see, we got two people now on the stream. Let's see if we get any more names from the premiere chat. Nice outfit. Thank you very much. Good evening. Hello, Hans. How are you doing? Hello, Gillette. Good morning. Yeah. It's I don't know where you live exactly, but I know it's like I'm on the other side of the globe from America, so it's got to be like 11 or something. Ahoy, Golden Gunpowder. Hello, Frequency. How are you doing? Very well, and yourself. I'm pretty good. It's a good day to be alive, you know. It's a good day not to be hanging from the gallows like John Rackham, you know. All right. Well, we have a few people dropping in. The stream is not like I've hosted like 2 live streams before. They're pretty long. This one is not going to be too long. It's going to be like an hour or so. We'll just talk about whatever. If you guys have any questions or whatever, we can talk about the video or whatever you guys want. Because yeah, I have some business later that I have to attend to. Maximilian Ward says, "Hey, it's the voice of the privateer. Yo, Harg, make fast, make." Nice to see you too. Magellan says, "Yo, hello, Magellan. Nice to see you." Magellan, if you can do me a favor, sure, purely so I can give you something to do, can you take the link to the live stream and like post it in the general chat of the on the Discord? I mean, I could do it myself, but just want to give you something to do. You know, it's called delegation. So Logan said, "Is there any place modern day you could be a pirate successfully?" I mean, last time I checked, it would be the Somalia, but I don't know if the Somali pirates are still active. The thing with the Somali pirates is that they do actually have a lot of things in common with the pirates of the 17th and 18th century. Like even like they claim to be, they call themselves the Coast Guard, and they also like they also invest in local infrastructure. Like when they brought in like a big ass oil tanker a few years back, they invested in like hotels and stuff, kind of like how pirates would build, like, you know, they would build like sugar plantations and stuff. Kadon Stanley said, apparently piracy is still a major issue in parts of Southeast Asia. Yeah, I reckon that like Asia is, if you like, Southeast Asia is actually like geographically very similar to the Caribbean. I'm not an expert on the geography there, but I reckon like it lends itself very positively. Like you can make these sort of like, especially with like motorboats, you can go farther on like fast sorties. So you can probably get up to some mischief in that area. I mean, Stanley, do you know like the like which like national groups those pirates belong to? Like which nation do they generally belong to? Because of course, a lot of like the Somali pirates are like exclusively Somali, I think. I'm not sure. But like in Asia, like in that region, there's like so many like different ethnicities and stuff. Logan said, "Why Jack Rackham have Anne Bonny and Mary Read aboard his ship?" We don't actually know. Like there isn't like enough information about it that explains what they were doing. Like pretty much the only thing we have about. I mean, I will do like the upcoming 2 videos about and Bonnie and Mary Read, like they have like their own separate videos. But there's like the only thing we know about them is like they dressed during engagements and chases. They dressed like men. Otherwise, they dressed like women aboard the ship, and they threatened captives. They passed during combat. They passed gunpowder to the men, so they seem to have performed like powder monkeys. And also the trial document describes them as spinsters, and spinster is like an unmarried woman. It stems from because if a woman was unmarried, she would usually work as a spinster, so like she's spinning cloth or whatever. Um, RIBC and Scotiabank still going strong. VBI, bro, you actually look like a pirate. Oh my god, yes. I wonder, I wonder why he's looking like a pirate. Yeah, it's because I am a pirate. Caden Stanley said, not an expert, but I have read a few accounts of illegal Chinese fishing vessels engaging in piracy, attacking policing vessels from South Korea and the Philippines. That sounds interesting. Um, Definitely sounds like a touchy subject, so we definitely have to be like verified. And like that's the thing. Often, like people, they disagree. Like, is this like a military attack? Is this piracy? Is that piracy? Um, and it was also the like Britain had like the Cod War, if I remember correctly, with Iceland. So like these like clashes over fishing rights can be dodgy, and there are like more cases of like fishermen attacking other fishermen. Tom Brazel said, "She's sea dogs." More like his like sea. What are they called? Sea pandas. Or like I don't know what kind of bear Winnie the Pooh is. I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna get banned from China. I don't want to get banned from China. Um, Tyler said, if I had to guess, brought him two ferret prostitutes, or boy, he needed some extra sailors. Um, yeah, the a lot of people speculate that Anne and Mary were prostitutes, but it's really like it's really not certain. Mary seems to have been older than like she's usually portrayed. There is evidence that points to her like being born in the late 1600s, so like Mary Read was a MILF. Underrated aesthetic. Dr. Fatman asked, didn't Vane also have women on board at some point? Yeah, he did. I'm pretty certain they were not aboard his ship willingly. So, and Bonnie and Mary Read were voluntary. They were definitely there on their own will. And I don't think they ever claimed otherwise. Like everyone else claimed to have been forced, but actually no, they didn't. Like half of Rackham's crew claimed to be forced, but they never did. Rackham from Black Sail is awesome. Yeah, he's generally quite liked. RIBC and Scotiabank were two Canadian privateers who successfully survived and thrived during the age of piracy. All right. Kaden Stanley, is this your William Dampier Halloween costume? No, this is how I dress normally. This is my everyday clothes when I go to sea. Electric Eye 1984 by Sam Henry. Is that a cinnamon toothpick? No, it's just a general toothpick. I tend to pick my teeth all the time. Commander Bell asked, "Do pirates ever get married?" Yes. It's a bit of a complicated. Like, yes would be like the short and the simple answer, whereas the long answer would be um, it really depends on the golden age of piracy is like 100-year period, and gradually pirates would marry less, and it would become harder for them to marry. So basically, like the kind of like the whole period, like the 100-year period, it's pretty much defined by um, pirates having popular support bases in the Americas. So like places where they can go, they can spend their money, they can repair their ships, they can sell their booty, they can use the local services like taverns, church, brothels, whatever. And a lot of the girls, there's like a lot of examples of this, like in the late 17th century of the Red Sea pirates. So the guys like Henry Avery's crew would return to the 13 colonies like Boston and New York and those places, and they go to some wealthy merchant. They say, "Hey, look at these like cool, calico cloth, and stuff like that." And there, the daughters would be like, "Oh my God, he's so rich, he's so rich. Please sleep with me." Um, so yeah, like definitely like in the 17th century, pirates would definitely like get married, and they would use their wealth to buy property. It was very common for the Red Sea pirates. Now in the 18th century is when like pirates started losing their support bases, and they pretty much only had Nassau. And we actually see a lot of pirates having a rule where they say, "No, we don't welcome married men aboard." um, because it would bind them to a location, whereas the pirates of the early 18th century were way more nomadic than the pirates of the earlier century. It's a pretty complicated topic. I mean, the whole like pirates and gender relations and just on marriage, it's very complicated. But basically, for most of the age, yeah, they would have been married. Um, Hans Steinhauer asked, "How do you came to the topic of piracy?" I mean, I kind of always liked pirates aesthetically. Um, I started researching it in like 2019, and it kind of like snowballed from there. Like I got more into the history, like more and more over time. But like the interest has like always been there. Uh, Tyler said, "I feel Steve Bonnet should hand over the title of lame pirate to Rackham." Yeah, I think Steve Bonnet gets like way too much flack. At the same time, I do think when I started researching Rackham for this video, he was more impressive than like I imagined him to be. Like I only thought like he captured like a few fishing boats, but he actually captured like two merchant sloops or whatever. So he did more than I expected. But I don't like really branding someone like lame or like whatever. It feels like a bit unnecessarily derogatory. Everyone has like different experiences, and you know, there's just we just know so little about him. What I really wish is like if people are wish to continue portraying him in media, that they do something different, um, especially something different with like Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Like you always see like Anne Bonny portrayed as Rackham's girlfriend, but Mary Read might as well have been Rackham's girlfriend, or maybe she wasn't. Maybe John didn't have any girlfriend at all. They could have been like uh, the girlfriends of his officers, whatever. His officers don't get any attention whatsoever. It's a bit of a shame, uh, especially Featherstone, who we actually know about his pirating background. Kaden said, "Yeah, Bonnet wasn't spectacular, but he gets shit on too much, I think." Yeah, I agree. 2008, David Kang said, "Did the pirate age in question overlap with the later days of the Landsknechts?" Now, if I remember correctly, the Landsknechts, they kind of faded into obscurity in the late 1500s, and the pirate age is like tends to start in like 1630, which is like after the like heyday of the Landsknechts. There were a lot of German conquistadors who went to the New World in the 1500s. I think they were active in Venezuela, for example. Um, and there were, of course, a few German pirates. Dirk Shivers, as he's called in English, he's probably one of the most prominent. Tyler said, "Perfect example of a married pirate, Martha Farley's husband." It's how, yeah, exactly. Martha Farley got away with it. I think the one thing she did was like sitting on a hatch, using her fucking dummy thickness. Bonnet, Dr. Fatman said Bonnet was almost as much of a loser pirate as Rackham, just to get tight with Blackbeard, which gave him some cred. He did like his last fight was pretty impressive, and he did do like more. I think he did more impressive stuff than Rackham. But it's also like at the same time, I don't think you should like. Yeah, I think you should always like present all of these like actions as kind of like neutrally and objectively as possible, and not like try to apply some sort of value on them. Like unless if you like, fine, if you support piracy, then sure you can say it's great or whatever. But like if you don't support piracy and if you don't support like that form of use of violence, then you probably shouldn't like put some sort of value on it. Princess Olmeca said, "I wonder if there were homosexual pirates in the Golden Age." Uh, One pirate was accused of being homosexual, but he was imprisoned by his crewmates for it. Other than that, there isn't like anything. Not to mention like the our conception, like the identity, like homosexuality nowadays is like an identity. It's how you identify. That form of identification didn't exist at all in like the 17th or 18th century. Their concept of what we would call homosexual intercourse was different. So it's hard to say. Um, Peter said, just finished watching the Rackham vid, and I must say I love the Shippy segment. Thank you, Pete. Do you think you will ever do this again when discussing one's career step by step? Um, yeah, if it's relevant and if it's easy to track, because like Rackham's career is so easy to track. Like we pretty much know what he did step by step, and it's also a very short career. So it wasn't like I didn't have to animate a whole lot. But when it comes to these like video animations, I kind of just do it when I have like the energy and when I get the idea for it. But I get the ideas based on energy. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. Tyler said Bonnet's final battle at least went on for a while and had people die. Rackham is like a minute, nobody. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm not even sure if you can call it a battle. Caden sounds, yeah, as far as Marooners go, Bonnet fared pretty well against Pirate Hunters compared to most of his contemporaries. Yeah, definitely. Bonnet, he gets like a lot of unnecessary flack. Tom Brassel said, "Is it known if Rackham had Jacobite sympathies like Vane or Blackbeard?" No, it's not known at all. I'm thinking about something, but I don't think there is. Not at the top of my mind, and I would probably remember it. Torquemada said, "Show us the new gun." Oh, you want to see my gun, do you? Well, too bad, kiddo. I'll show it to you. There it is. I've ordered some. The engravings here on the other side are like very nice. This is metal, so it's like they have cut it. The gunsmith cut it into the wood and then like sort of stamped this like metal bit here. And you see, you can they're like these two screws here, and you can like unscrew them, and that releases the lock here on the other side. It's if you see here, it says like I don't know if you can. Yeah, it's too dark to see it, but it says like it's made by the company Lacey and Company. The company was active, I think, between 1776 and 1840, and I think they renamed in 1840, and then the renamed company closed down in like 1856 or something. So the pistol isn't like from the pirate age per se, but from what I've seen, this is like basically what this sort of pistol would have looked like throughout the whole period. I think there are like some changes like internally in the lock. I have been digging around in the lock. I've disassembled this gun and looked at the lock. I've ordered some grease because like the lock is a bit fucky. It works. It's just I think like the interior of the wood kind of like fucks with the lock, and I think some grease is just gonna make it work better. If I can get the lock to like work reliably, um, I will probably go out and shoot it, and I might make some videos on it. Um, the metal on this like gun is excellent. Like this is like stuff which will last like thousands of years. We have like we have findings from the Bronze Age. This is it's brass. Brass was, and this is like blackened iron or like blackened steel. So brass, of course, apart from looking really beautiful, it's resilient towards water. It's moisture resistant, so it's very good for sea service firearms. And of course, also steel would be blackened or coated with what's called japanning, which would also protect it against sea moisture. Um, so definitely, and of course, there were like brass farms in the 1600s and 18th century. So this is definitely like what a pistol could look like in the period, and it's very like ergonomic. It's a very high quality. The wood is beautiful, but yeah, it's a bit cracked in a lot of places, and I think it also fucks with the lock from what I've experimented with. But it might also be that the lock just needs oil. Oil. Um, I have sort of a long-term ambition to like replace the wood entirely, which is possible. Like you just make like a new pistol stock, and then you like cut the metal bits into it, essentially. But it's like a long-term ambition. I would need access to some. I pretty much know how to do it. I would just need like access to. I would probably mess it up quite a lot, but hey. um, are you a time traveling pirate by any chance? It's possible. Yeah, I'm glad you. I saw you said magnificent Torquemada. I'm glad you like it. It's definitely a beautiful piece. Um, Electric Eye. Are you already familiar with firearms? Nice weapon, very cool. Yeah, I have military experience and I have hunting license, so I know firearms. I'm not so experienced with pistols. I'm mostly like experienced with long arms. I have fired pistols, and like it was light caliber. The thing is, like where I live, it's like really hard to get like a pistol license. You have to like pretty much actively maintain it. Whereas like hunting license allows you to buy like pretty much like all rifles, like all calibers, and you only need like a hunting license once, and then you have it for the rest of your life and can like buy guns or whatever. Whereas like a pistol license is like, yeah, you have to like constantly maintain it. But the thing is, like where I live, firearms which do not have I forgot what it's called in English, like United, like cartridges, like a cartridge which contains both propellant, primer, and bullet in a casing. You're not allowed to have those types of firearms without a license, but you can have like these old muzzle loaders and pretty much any firearm manufactured before like 1870, I think, 1890. Uh, so yeah. Uh, someone had a question I wanted to. Oh yeah, Artemis entity. I'll put us back in the belt. It's also like it's very good. I'm gonna make some videos on like pistols next year, so it's like very good to have just to like test out what like how parts might have worn them. For example, centerfire. Yeah, well, yes, but centerfire cartridge is like a type of these like United cartridges. Like there's also like pinfire, which I don't know if like, but then again they don't have like, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, centerfire is like one of those types. But yeah, I've tried out like some of the ways in which like pirates carried pistols. Like they did like the silk sling, and it's definitely possible. Um, Artemis Entity asked, "It is likely that Vane and Bonnet ever met. If so, how did Vane likely feel about him? I'm wondering for a book I'm writing." This is something you can probably research very easily. Like Vane, of course. I don't know if they're like so. Vane apparently met Blackbeard at some point. I don't remember if that is from like general history or if it's actually been like proven. I don't remember like too much, and it's like, but you can probably look it up. But I'd advise to be careful with like general history. I'd probably recommend you look at Bayless Brooks, his work. He has like documented Blackbeard very thoroughly, and he also has like a book, so you can look at like if there are timelines. And of course, Bayless has like since he writes about Blackbeard, he writes about Steve Bonnet quite a bit as well. I don't think like Steve Bonnet, Charles Vane was primarily based, and Charles Vane also he also appears in like in the late period. I haven't read about him in a while, so I don't like the details are a bit fuzzy. 2008, David Kang asked, "Was there brass arquebuses and muskets?" Yeah, there were. Um, Maximilian Ward said, "You might have less trouble as since it is historical antique, but if you rebuild, make it a replica, that's where the difficulties could." See, there's like this like the that's where the difficulties might come in for the naval pistol. What difficulties are you speaking of? And Maximilian, do you have like some sort of do you have like experience with like working with um, farms, legal ownership paperwork? Um, yeah, that's a good point. Would have to look it up. Me, no hearing, me, no hearing Canada by law. All right. Uh, Drake Vime said, referring to title, there was a Tintin comic book and film too, where they were searching for Red Rackham's treasure. Very cool, also. Um, yeah, I thought about talking about the Red Rackham character in the video on John, but I mean, it's only like the only like thing he shares with Rackham is like the name is like inspired by it. Otherwise, he's kind of based on what's he called? Montbar. Like visually, Red Rackham is based on like a 19th century illustration of a French pirate named Montbar. Um, so I didn't think it was too relevant to discuss the Tintin character as compared to like the other comparisons I did in the video. Tyler said, I find it interesting that Rackham's body was treated noticeably harsher than anyone else despite such a short career and one lacking in violence. Yeah, his head was like decapitated and stuff. That is pretty brutal. Uh, Interesting point. Like, I actually realized it in like Assassin's Creed when he's like he's placed in the gibbet incorrectly. Like the gibbet just looks like a cage, and it's just like it's just his skeleton sitting in the cage. Also, he turned to a skeleton very quickly. Like, people kind of underestimate how like long it takes for a body to turn into a skeleton, or well, for the flesh to disappear. Tom Brassel asked, "Did pirates in the 1600s have any impact on the Indian Wars happening in the colonies around the time?" Yeah, I read about it recently. Um, in the late 1600s, the various governors of the 13 colonies would invite buccaneers to help fight against the Indians, because the buccaneers, of course, the colonial militias, they were inexperienced in in fighting in the sort of in the sort of fashion as the native tribes, who fought like essentially guerrilla, like, hit and run, loose formations, skirmishing. But the Buccaneers, of course, they were very experienced fighting in this manner. They were experts at it, really, because that's how they fought the Spanish. Um, so they were really good at like, and of course, the many Buccaneers had fought alongside Indians, like the Cuna of Darien. They had fought the Spanish together with them, and they had also fought Spanish-aligned Indians, auxiliaries. And the Buccaneers who fought in the Indian Wars, like in the late 1600s, they they would also use dogs. It's actually been documented, which is very interesting because of course, the Buccaneers were known for using dogs in hunting, but I've never encountered them using dogs like militarily, like on campaigns. But here's like I read about them using dogs in the Indian Wars when hired for fighting against the native tribes, and they used the dogs for tracking in swamps and stuff, which is a really terrifying prospect. It is incredibly interesting, but because it shows that maybe the Buccaneers used dogs when fighting the Spanish or when on campaigns of plundering and stuff, and that they might have brought these dogs from their hunting days, And we do know, of course, that like dogs appeared on pirate ships, and dogs, of course, dogs are very useful for a lot of purposes, like especially land campaigns. Like a dog can be a sentry. They can guard, and of course they're very like useful for like finding your targets using the nose. I hope that answers your question. It's a very interesting one. I don't know too much about it apart from this. Um, 2008, David Kang asked, "Will you do a video on Lawrence de Graaf? Read about him recently, and he seemed pretty overpowered. Please nerf." Yeah, he was pretty overpowered. I want to make a video on him definitely in the future, but like since he's not, I kind of want to. I kind of want to cover famous pirates more purely because like it's gonna generate more views, whereas like Lawrence de Graaf is not very well known, not even like in the Netherlands. So I don't think like the video is gonna get a lot of attention. So I'm gonna save it for later. But yeah, I do like Lawrence de Graaf, and I do include like examples about him in like videos a lot, and we know so much about him. So there's like a lot of like information there, but uh, we'll see. I have like the idea of like making a sort of video where I kind of introduce several, like something like 5 pirates you haven't heard of, or like some dumb shit like that. Because like there are like several pirates which are definitely like severely underrated, which have like a lot of stuff documented about them, like Lawrence de Graaf, of course, also one of his associates, Chevalier Gramont, who was like, I mean, he's like Henry, the equal of Henry Morgan in terms of tactics. Like Gramont was like a tactical and strategic genius, and he used cavalry. He organized like buccaneer cavalry units, and he was very successful. And then, of course, Bartholomew Sharp. He's my favorite pirate. I always mention him. uh, Andrew Ryan said, "Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well." Hello, Andrew. Hope you're doing fine as well. Fran, the one and only, asked, "Were there any cases of long-lasting beef or rivalry between pirate crews? If yes, what's an example of said beef?" I thought at first when I skimmed your comment, I thought you were asking about um, salt beef. You know, the provision. um, Long-lasting rivalry between pirate crews. The generally like crews, like companies, avoided having like grudges. Like if they would like develop a grudge, it would usually be like after a battle, and then they would like the battle failed, and they would split up and just go their separate ways, and like, yeah, we don't want to fight. We'll just go before things get out of hand, you know. And the thing is, like, we also have cases of pirates who separate, but then like individuals from these like separated crews, they reunite, and they're like, "Hey, dude, how are you doing?" And they like join up. So like even if like two crews maybe separate for they have differing opinions, these individuals might not harbor like individual grudges. For example, I think the best example is um, Basil Ringrose. Basil Ringrose, Lionel Wafer, and William Dampier. They all sailed under Bartholomew Sharp. When Sharp regained captaincy after a mutiny against him, Dampier and Lionel split away. But um, Basil Ringrose, he stayed with Sharp. And a few years later, in the same ocean, uh, William Dampier met Ringrose, and he was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And you know, they were like best friends. So even if they like disagreed on who should be captain, they could still be friends. And then, of course, there's the famous example of like Henry Jennings and Hornigold. They were like rivals, but they competed over who was like the leader in like NASA, the flying gang. They sometimes seem to have like interfered in like prize captures, but there isn't much evidence of their rivalry getting like violent and armed. It mostly seems to have been like kind of just bickering. Uh, AC4 gets the date terribly wrong, says it's August 1720. Yeah, I think it's actually like April of 1720, when yeah, like October is when. No, Mary Read died in. She died in like I think it's like May or April of 1720, but her trial was in I think November of 1720. Andrew Ryan asked, "Hey there, Golden Gunpowder. I watched you for a while now. Yeah, I think I've seen you in the comments, and I've noticed that your Olivier Levasseur video is gone. Yeah, it's pretty old. It has some like it has some misinformation on it, and was just kind of poorly made. So I've deleted like most of my older videos, and I will like make a new Olivier Levasseur video sometime in the future, but I don't. It doesn't seem to be that it's gonna come out in like a long while, like 2 or 3 years, but it's gonna come eventually." Um, Tom Brazel asked, "Do you recommend any books that mention Buccaneers fighting the Indians? It always interests me that the Buccaneers were raiding the Spanish Main at the same time that King Philip's War was beginning." Um, I don't remember when King Philip's War occurred exactly. Uh, I think it was earlier in the 1600s and when the Buccaneers were hired. Um, The book I read it in was like the book wasn't about like the Indian War specifically. It just mentioned it how Buccaneers were like integrated into society. It's called "Pirate Nests and the Rise of the British Empire" by Mark G. Hanna. So I'll write it to you in the comments, and you can look it up. Uh, Pirate Nests and the Rise of the British Empire by Mark G. Hanna. There we go. Harinan Hoppus asked, "Did some pirates use crossbows?" There isn't like any sort of eyewitness descriptions or documentation of crossbows being a weapon used by them, but there are like manuals from the period which mention combustible arrows being that could potentially be fired from a crossbow. So the crossbow could have been used for that purpose, and there are mentions of pirates using fire arrows, but they could also be fired from like bows. They could sometimes be shot from guns, but they wouldn't use crossbows for. It doesn't seem like they used crossbows for like normal projectiles, like in the Middle Ages. If you want pirates who use crossbows, you would have to go to the 1500s when crossbows were very common with the conquistadors. I think the crossbow was probably one of their favorite weapons, more so than the arquebus, and also the French Huguenot corsairs who were active in the Caribbean. They used crossbows quite a lot, but they also used muskets or well arquebuses. Princess Olmeca said, "I didn't know pirates hunted with dogs, let alone brought them on their ships. I learned something new today." I'm glad you learned something. It's very interesting, and something which would be interesting to learn more about. But we do know there's quite a lot of information about the dogs used by the Buccaneers, so which is like the hunters, which the Buccaneers stemmed from. Andrew Ryan asked, "Have you heard something about a Lioness of Britain? Would 15th century pirates be too early for the channel?" I haven't heard about the Lioness of Britain. 15th century pirates would be too early because I focus on the New World, so the colonies or like colonial societies on my channel, which kind of like does encompass sometimes like the Red Sea or like Asia, if like the colonies are sort of involved in those affairs. John in the WAP said, "I wonder if I'm going to be cancelled for reading your name out loud." You look like you're about to sign the Declaration of Independence. You're 100 years too too late. Actually, like the coat I'm wearing, like it's actually like it's based on a coat RD, which is like a medieval clothing from like the 1400s, but it's basically the same as like coats worn in the 1600s, and there are also like coats from the 18th century, especially the early 18th century, which are like similar to it. Interesting is like the buttons are made from cloth. So if Crew of the Fancy watches this stream, or if he's in the stream and is hiding from me, he's scared of my pistol. He's probably gonna like it. He likes buttons. He's a tailor. 2008 David Kang, the OP pirate that put Blackbeard to shame. That might mitigate the lack of use on the Graf, maybe. There's a lot of like titles you could potentially use on him. In general, I kind of like when doing biographies, I kind of want like using like as simplistic titles as whatever. Like my favorite biography title is like the one I did on William Kidd, where I just titled the video like Captain William Kidd, because like yeah, there isn't like I don't like these super bombastic titles like the most epic pirate that ever existed. Damn, you know. Um, Andrew Ryan said, "That's very nice to know. Hope that you enjoy researching Olivier Levasseur. I I don't research him in depth like too much, but I do. He does appear definitely. I do mention him quite a lot in videos because I mean he was just like active for such a long period of time. So And also the fact that like one of the very interesting things, and also we have like a lot of documentation about him as well, because like he um there were a lot of captives who were captured by him or captured by people he associated with who described their captivity. So they described Levasseur or his associates. He was actually at some point he actually tried to split off from Richard Taylor too early, and Taylor actually whipped him, which is very interesting. The pirates of the early 18th century were, of course, very adamant about not splitting up the company too early. Um, and of course, Levasseur has also been documented as using at least at least four unique flags. At least four unique flags, as in like designed black Jolly Roger flags. Um, Bartholomew Bartholomew Roberts is usually recognized as the one who has like a lot of flags. Um, but most of those flags seem to be made up. There's only evidence of him using one or two unique flags, whereas Levasseur used at least four, possibly six. But those, like two of those flags are like white backgrounds with like one has like a skull, a black skull, and the other has like a black skeleton. Those may have been used by other French pirates. Uh, Tom Brassel said, and thanks by the way. Oh, no problem. John at Wap said, "Do you dress like this daily, or this, or is this just a little treat for us?" I do dress like this on special occasions. You know, like when it's relevant, when I'm at sea plundering. But basically, yeah, I do it as like a treat for you to sort of get in character, just for fun. Hareen and Hopper said grenade arrows. That's effing metal. Yeah, there were like some really weird weapons, but it isn't grenades necessarily as like just a burning arrow, which are like meant to set sails on fire. Because naval combat outside of like battle lines and the Royal Navy was mostly about destroying the enemy's rigging. Uh, you legit look like an 18th century pirate, as I said. I wonder why. um, Tyler said Jean de Clisson is who the lioness is. 1300s era, I'd say. Um, yeah, there's a lot of legends about these like female pirates, but I talked about her on like the last stream. One of those like pirates who was accused of witchcraft, who actually seems to have partaken in boarding combat. But a lot of these like female pirates who are like recognized, they most of the part they weren't actually pirates. They were more so like um, aristocratic women who employed pirates, but they weren't like active pirates themselves. But this like woman who was accused of witchcraft, she actually partook in boarding combat. But we never hear anyone talking about her, which is beats me. Andrew, please do not get kidnapped, Golden Gunpowder. We can't have America and Britain having another war of 1812. I'd be very flattered if they would fight a war over me. I'd be very flattered. I don't see why they would though. Random Better said, "What games did pirates play on board their ships? Did they even have any free time?" Yeah, they had lots of free time. So on regular ships, on regular sailing ships, you divided the crew into like your work was divided into 4-hour shifts, and you alternated between working and relaxing in 4-hour shifts. So at a very basic, you would get 4 hours of chilling, sleeping, eating, doing whatever. I know they would do a bunch of stuff. Most common seems to have been crafting. Well, it seems to have been very popular. Like you could have repaired your clothes, like sewing. You could also have crafted, like pirates spent a lot of time maintaining their weapons, like repairing them, oiling them, polishing them, maybe modifying them, like carving some sort of art in them, because it was very common for sailors to engage in scrimshawing, which is just carving. you carve like some sort of item out of bone or wood. These were the most common materials. And they would carve like sort of containers for smoking pipes. They would carve crucifixes, religious objects, stuff like that. Maybe if they needed buttons, they would make buttons. Um, and yeah, they would definitely like play games. Dice was one of the most common. They would make their own dice. Um, and there were probably cards, but dice seems to have been the most common. And gambling often became such a problem that the parts of the 18th century often forbade gambling because people would bet money, they would bet on stupid stuff, and people would kill each other. Like there is literally like Bartholomew Sharp in the 17th century. He was deposed for winning too much in gambling against his own men. Bartholomew Sharp, he was a brilliant sailor. He was a brilliant diplomat. He was really good at what he did, but he shouldn't have gambled with his own men. That was really, really dumb. I hope I answered your question. It's a complicated topic again, but yeah, they gambled and played games aboard their ships. Fran, the one and only, asked, "Were there any Eastern European pirates?" So in Eastern Europe, there were the Cossacks, and the Cossacks were, of course, like they were actually compared to the Buccaneers in the 18th century. And the Cossacks, they would go on light boats. They would travel upriver, and they would go into the Caspian Sea, into Persia, and they would raid the coasts. And they would also go to like Turkey, to the Ottoman Empire, and raid. Uh, there might have been like some Polish. I mean, Poland isn't Eastern Europe; it's like Central Europe. But yeah, whatever. There might have been some Poles in the Caribbean. I don't want to go into why because it's like a bit long-winded. Basically, they were like the Kingdom of Prussia, which had Polish possessions, including Polish-speaking coastline. They engaged in some privateering in the West Indies, and of course there was like the Duchy of Coronia, which is like modern day Latvia, but it was controlled by like German-speaking dukes. They had a like a colony in the Caribbean, so there might have been like some Baltic Germans and Latvians in the Caribbean, maybe, maybe. Um, oh, we got a super chat. Prince Omega did a $10 super chat. Thank you very much. Did brand new pirates in that time build their own small ships to start off with, or did they steal someone else's ship and make it their own? Very interesting question. And I'm kind of thinking about how to like tackle it. So if you're talking about like small ships, the most common type of like boat they would construct would just be like a canoe. And like a lot of pirates in the 17th century, they were logwood cutters, so a type of like lumberjack. And they were like, of course, very experienced in cutting down trees and then cutting those trees into canoes. But if you didn't know how to construct a canoe, you could steal it. And the canoe was like the most popular boat in the New World. The best canoes were made by Native Americans. They sometimes bought canoes from Native Americans. They sometimes got them in an alliance, and they sometimes stole them. Um, and if you move up from the canoe to like more complicated vessels, like masted canoes, piraguas, or even decked vessels like sloops and stuff, um, there are definitely cases in the Caribbean of like pirates. Because in the 17th century, pirates were more ingrained with the local society, and oftentimes they were like pirate captains were like landholders, or they had friends or relatives who were landholders, and these landholders could construct sloops, for example. The best example lies on the island of Bermuda. Bermuda started a very was very involved in the shipbuilding industry in the 17th century, where like the landowners would they would build their own sloops, and then they would crew the sloops themselves. They would be the owner of the sloop and the master. So the master is like the navigator, but also like the captain. And they would go on like they could go on pirating trips, but they could also just go on trading trips and gather salt in the Bahamas, which is south of Bermuda. And of course, we have pirates like Thomas Tew, who was legally he was a privateer. He was supposed to steal from the French, but he went instead to the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea and stole from Muslim pilgrims. And Captain Tew's ship was the Amity, which was a sloop constructed in Bermuda by his friends on Bermuda. So we have these like cases of pirates and privateers. The word here being ill-defined, constructing their own ships. And there are also incidents of shipwrecked privateers using wreckage to build barks, and barks being like one or two masted decked sailboat, kind of like a sloop, but clumsier. So you could use shipwreck to construct a boat, basically. So yeah, there we have like three examples to summarize. They could build canoes or steal canoes. If they had like land-holding friends or owned land, they could construct sloops and stuff. Or if they were shipwrecked, they could construct basic sailboats out of wreckage. I hope that answered your question. It's very interesting. I will probably cover it in a separate video sometime in the future. Very interesting. Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad I was able to answer your question. We have a lot of questions. I'm gonna close the stream in like 10 minutes, but so I'm probably sadly not gonna be able to answer all questions. But since the stream was pretty popular, I will probably do like one of these like post-release like next week. We'll see. And you can also like ask me like questions wherever, or like save it for the next stream or whatever you want. Rick Harrison asked, "How accurate is Assassin's Creed Black Flag to real-life pirates?" Yeah, it was. It's not very accurate. It's not very accurate at all, I'm afraid. But it doesn't mean it's a bad game. It's just not a historically accurate game. 2008 David Kang asked, "Did the pirates ever use pemmican and provisions, whether on land or at sea?" Pemmican, I know roughly what it is. Mostly on sea, you would have like salt beef, and also like smoked dried meat called boucan or barbecue. I haven't like encountered pemmican being used. There's someone here who has like a name in Greek Cyrillic. I do not know how to read Greek Cyrillic. I hope you know who you are. But he asks, did pirates use any Caribbean native words? Yeah, the word buccaneer stems from Bucan, which is originally an Arawak or Carib word. There's like the example at the top of my head. Piotr said Poland mentioned. Yeah, there we go. Frequency IO said, "Why is it that Americans try so hard to claim pirate heritage when all they have is the battle between Teach and Maynard off the Carolina coast?" You're completely wrong. The Americans, like what we of course, like the what we consider the like American colonies back then, included the Caribbean. So I would say like Caribbean pirate history is American history, like U.S. history. And of course, like the 13 colonies, which constitutes the east coast of the modern U.S., was incredibly involved with piracy in the early in the 17th century. Like the pirates like Henry Avery and like those pirates, Thomas Tew, they had friends and allies in the on the modern day East Coast. They would settle down in these communities. These communities would provide for them. These communities were pretty much started with piracy in mind. Like they were dependent on piracy early on for supplying them with even just the crops like sugar and tobacco, which they could produce, and also the slave labor to work plantations, and even slaves just to teach them how to produce tobacco, because the slaves were stolen from Spanish plantations where they had learned this stuff. So yeah, like the pirate history is U.S. history, is incredibly relevant. and it's underrated in U.S. history. Like they should, you Americans, you should be learning more about pirates. It's very important. Uh, 2008, David Kang asked, "Did they ever get to make any money with scrimshawing, like selling them on shore? Must have been cool." Um, I'm not sure. They don't seem to have worked much with metal because they didn't have the tools on board a ship to work with metal. What they probably would have done would have been to like clip money. So they take like big tongs and they literally like snap or clip bits of precious metal off the coins. And then those clippings could be used as a form of payment in and of itself or melted down into new coins. But mostly what they would do with like silverware was to like, now in the colonies like Port Royal, for example, you have a lot of silversmiths and a lot of goldsmiths. Why? Because pirates stole a lot of these precious metals like gold and especially silver, and they would sell it to they would fence it to these silver and goldsmiths who would then melt it down into like chandeliers, and then the chandeliers and the objects, they might get melted down again sometime in the future and made into new coins in like Britain. So the pirates basically, they wouldn't like make money, but they would fence their money to silversmiths and stuff. It's very interesting stuff. Um, Maximilian Ward said Black Bart also recruited many of his crew from Canadian maritime fishermen. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the pirates of like the 1720s, they started out in the 13 colonies, like John Phillips, for example. There's another pirate I'm thinking of, but I can't. I don't remember his name. Rickhausen asked, besides the British Navy, what pirates had the most amount of ships during the 17th and 18th century? Um, it sounds like you're trolling since you're calling it seems like you're calling the British Navy pirates. Um, I don't know who had the most ships at the time. Uh, let's see here. The next question. Space Monkey said, "Damn, dude, I'm disappointed. Thought you were in Spain." Oh, okay, you asked someone else. All right. Yeah, I'm not in. I'm not in Spain. Uh, Tyler asked, "I have one last question. What do you think happened to Rackham's stolen sloop, the William? It was clearly towed back to Jamaica and was only somewhat damaged, and probably sold." Uh, it might have been sold. It might also have been. It might also have been confiscated by the local authorities. Like if you look at what happened to Stede Bonnet's sloop, the Royal James slash Revenge. It was confiscated by the governor, and it was then used uh, by the governor for pirate hunting. So he incorporated it into his private fleet. Uh, so that is, I mean, no one is able to. I don't think anyone has like found anything documented about the Williams' fate. So you can speculate: was it sold? Yeah, possibly. Was it maybe given to the men who caught Rackham? Possibly. Could it have been taken by the judge or the governor? Very likely. I'm gonna bet that it was taken by the governor, and probably given like a new name. And the new name might also be why we don't know what happened to it. But a new name could have been happened to any sort of fate. Um, let's see if we have some last question to round off on. Um, Alex, I just want to say your videos are great. Thank you very much. 2008 David Kang asked, all right, so I'm going to answer this question and then I'm going to close the stream for tonight. Thank you for the information. That was interesting, but I meant to ask whether they sold their scrimshaw artwork on shore. I imagine it would be cool for the locals to own a pirate-made artwork. Very interesting question. From what it seems like the stuff they made were like very small personal items, like a crucifix or somewhere to keep their pipe, like a little box. So I would guess they were like, for one, I don't think you could have sold this stuff for a lot of money compared to like just the plunder they had. Maybe you could give it as like a gift to someone. Maybe you could sell it if you were like really desperate for money. but for the most part, I think they would have kept it. But it's not something I've, and scrimshawing in general is like, it's mostly based on archaeology. We have, so it's not something very documented. I hope that answered your question. It's not something easily answered. We have to like guess a lot. But yeah, a lot of people are saying good night and stuff. Take care, Golden. We need more dedicated pirate channels like you out there. It's kind of nice not having competition. There's a bit, but at the same time, like competition can also like, if more interest, I kind of view it as like if we have like more interest in pirates, that means like more people are gonna watch my videos. So I don't really mind. You can move from both sides. But yeah, thank you everyone for attending the stream. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Next week's video, of course, will be about, I think it's Mary Read. So I hope you'll look forward to it. And I might do one of these streams like next week as well. And I hope you show up. Have a good day, have a good evening, wherever you are in the world. And I'll see you later.